Graham crackers. This all started with my little daughter screaming. She's usually asleep at this time. Meanwhile, our upstairs neighbors, the Jeffersons, got the urge to start renovating now. So my child's frantic screaming hit my brain along with the sounds of a power drill. Nanny Mia comes over at this time of day to give the maternity mom, that is me, a chance to rest. However, this time, as luck would have it, she was out and about. Soon the rumbling faded. Mia finally showed up and, avoiding me, headed to put the baby to sleep. But I wasn't willing to let the Jeffersons make noise during the baby's afternoon nap. I walked upstairs and knocked irritably on the door, pulled the handle, and the door opened. I walked across the threshold and saw it. A body stretched out in the middle of the room. As I came closer, I turned cold with horror. It was Frederick, Jefferson's head of the family, and he was dead. It was obvious without even checking his pulse. Naked, legs bound, mouth taped shut, and with that same power drill in his head. To be completely honest, in my mind, I wanted to do it to him myself a minute ago, but someone else got ahead of me. His hands were behind his back, but they weren't tied, although there were faint bruises on his wrists. A few silver lurex threads glistened on the floor nearby. I got a lump in my throat. I called the police. A female voice asked me to wait for the officers. A rustling sound came from behind. It was Billy, the Jeffersons' 13-year-old son. His lean body trembled. His pale greenish face was covered with sweat. Poor thing. I got this urge to protect him. But what could I possibly do? Except to grab his hand and lead him away from the body into the kitchen? His palms felt icy, and the cuffs of his perfectly ironed shirt, fresh from the closet, were wet for some reason. I tried to dial Alice, Billy's mother, but her cell phone was out of range. The boy, picking his words carefully, explained that his mom had left for work out of town yesterday. I poured some water for Billy, wrapped him up with a blanket, and went to poke around the apartment. There were no signs of a fight around the body, no broken furniture, no scattered things. I ran my eyes over a Jefferson family portrait taken in this very room. There were some decorated shelves in the background. A white teddy bear was sitting there. Meanwhile, there was no bear on the actual shelves. I walked closer. On the dust-covered surface, there was a clear spot where there was no dust. So the teddy bear was taken just a while ago. Was it a fetishist maniac who did this? I peeked into Frederick and Alice's room. There wasn't much there. Wait a minute, there was a woman's bag in the corner. Gee, I wondered if Alice might have left without it. So I stepped into Billy's room. That's where it was a real mess. I was getting stuffy. Billy was lucky enough to have a private bathroom in his room. I ran the faucet and washed my face. The water filled the sink fast. Something was blocking it from draining. I dipped my fingers into the gutter and groped for a piece of cloth. I pulled it and found a thin woman's scarf in my hand. It was torn here and there, silver threads sticking out of it, just like the ones on the floor. I smelled the familiar tart scent of perfume. My lord, that's probably what Frederick's hands were tied with. Two things need to be clarified. The first is Billy. His wet cuffs and scarf in the gutter meant he was here before I got here, and he was trying to hide the evidence. The second one is Mia. I recognized both the scarf and the scent. They were hers. I panicked. I dialed the police again and told them that my daughter was probably in danger. She was staying with the killer. But they told me to wait for the police. I tried to get Billy to talk. I showed him my find and he confessed that he had a crush on Mia. He knew she hadn't killed his father, but because of that scarf, she could go to jail and he would never see her again. Billy burst into tears. That's when I finally remembered that Mia was his former sitter. I hired her on the Jeffersons' recommendation. I asked him if he knew who killed his father, since it wasn't Mia. That's when the cops came running into the apartment. If there was anything Billy was going to tell me, now he'd changed his mind. He pulled his head into his shoulders and shut his eyes. I was fingerprinted and interviewed. Billy had a child psychologist with him. As soon as I got released, I rushed home. Mia was in front of my apartment at that moment, confirming her alibi. She held a receipt for cigarettes from a store nearby. The time indicated there matched the time when I heard the noise at my neighbor's house. That was enough for the cops, and they left. And yet I knew more than they did. I knew about the scarf. So I asked determinedly if she had killed Frederick, tied his hands with a scarf and drilled his head. Mia's eyes doubled in size. She threw up right on our playmat. And then the confessions came pouring out of her. It turned out Mia had been Frederick's lover for a year. He paid her for this and was especially generous for rough sex. She was with him today too, and she tied Frederick up at his own request, but not with her scarf. They used a white silk sash from a lady's robe. Then Mia saw shadows moving through the crack in the door to the next room. Frederick might have invited some pervert to watch them. That didn't surprise Mia. He'd filmed their playtime before. But the stranger's presence got her mad. Mia decided to teach this little freak a lesson. She dressed up quickly, spit out to a taped-up face, "Asshole," and took off. She wandered around the neighborhood for about an hour. Then she stopped at the store for cigarettes. As for the scarf, she must have left it at the Jeffersons. There was a message on Mia's phone. She glanced at the screen and slumped helplessly in her chair. Someone had posted a tagged photo on Facebook of her bent over her bound lover. Mia stayed at our place overnight, and the next morning she got arrested. No, not because of the prints on the power drill, because they didn't find any prints on there. But they did find her messages on the victim's cell phone. Mia wrote that she'd found a serious boyfriend and wanted to wrap things up. Frederick, in turn, demanded continuation and threatened to expose the relationship. Now, that's grounds for murder. Frederick could have been killed either by Mia herself or by her boyfriend, who might have caught them red-handed. There was definitely someone else in the apartment, though, and I couldn't stop worrying about the damn bear. I felt like if I found the toy, I'd find the murderer. Leaving my apartment under escort, Mia left her purse. I looked inside and found 2 sets of keys. One of them could be from Jefferson's apartment. Billy was picked up by social services. Alice's mobile was still out of range, so I decided to go over the crime scene again. Taking the baby with me seemed insane. But I had no choice. I wrapped myself in a sling with my sleeping girl and headed out. The keys matched the locks. I opened the door, walked over to where the body had been lying yesterday, and noticed something that had been hidden under a blood puddle, a little dent in the floor. Someone had not only damaged Frederick's head, but also the expensive parquet. Then I walked through Billy's room to the balcony. Like the rest of our house, it was surrounded by a trellis, braided with a strong wild grapevine running ground to roof. I hated it because small rodents often got into the apartment using it. Even a slim woman might be able to climb them, or a child. But being a floor below, I would definitely notice if someone was climbing in front of my windows. I looked up. There was an attic above the apartment, and the vines were broken here and there. I could see a thick rope through the leaves. I pulled on the rope, and a crude ladder dangled down in front of me. I didn't risk climbing it with a baby on my chest, but there was also a regular ladder to get to the attic. Upstairs, I found a junk-filled room with piles of books and notebooks. I opened up one of them. It was Billy's diary. A few pages were enough to realize Billy's father regularly abused his wife. The boy often ran away from this dread to the attic. He had once seen his father hold a switched-on power drill to his mother's temple and demand that she beg for mercy. So she might as well have killed her husband. The letters were blurred in front of my eyes. It was impossible to read without crying. I staggered, caught the stack of books, and they fell down. I spotted the very same teddy bear in between them. I grabbed it, examined it, and found the memory card slot. Why didn't I figure that out before? It was a hidden camera. I tried to call the police, but failed. There was no cell phone service in the attic. Just like Alice didn't have any, ran through my mind. Suddenly, something white flashed in front of my eyes. I felt it hard to breathe. My eyes went black. Someone was choking me. The only thing I heard was my baby crying, whose sleep was interrupted again. For a moment, the grip on my throat loosened, as if my opponent hesitated. I elbowed back as hard as I could. I heard a scream and a crashing sound behind me. I bent down and coughed. The white silk sash of a lady's robe slipped off my neck and onto the floor. I turned around while comforting my daughter, and my eyes met Alice's. Her whole face was bruised. The woman could barely stand on her feet. "Did you kill him?" I asked. The neighbor looked at me for a while, then asked, "Do you see what he has done to me?" There had been a fight between her and her husband the day before, and he had painted her black and blue, leaving no empty space. And then he made her watch him having fun with Mia. Elise took photos to use against Frederick. Her husband used to beat her nearly every single day. She had to quit her job and hardly ever left the house. Alice had long dreamed of putting a drill bit into his head. Otherwise, Frederick would never let her go. Every time she hinted at a divorce, he'd get his hands on her again. I sighed but said I had to call the police. Alice slumped down on the pile of junk on the floor. Suddenly, I spotted something that made me hang up the phone. It was a white shirt behind her. I reached over and yanked it from under Alice. No, it wasn't my imagination. The shirt was covered with tiny blood drops. That's the kind of pattern only someone who's killed would get. And it was a child's shirt. Alice turned pale and dropped to her knees. She begged me not to turn Billy over to the police. He'd been skipping school on the roof. When he sneaked down, he found Frederick and Mia. Alice was in her room. She heard the perforator turn on and froze in anticipation of receiving more torture from her husband. Then her husband's mooing. Alice ran out of the room, but it was too late. Everything had happened so fast. The son was holding a powered-up drill to his father's head, demanding that he beg for mercy. Frederick twitched, and that movement turned fatal. Billy didn't want to kill, but to teach him a lesson. I was listening to Alice, clutching the blood-stained shirt in my hands. To protect her son, the mother decided to throw Mia under the bus. She tied her husband's hands with Mia's scarf, posted a photo, and wiped the drill. Billy helped her up to the roof, and here she lost her strength. Alice didn't know if she had fallen asleep or died. She was seeing things, people, shadows. Suddenly, she straightened up and exclaimed as if awake, "Where's Billy?" Before I could answer her eyes rolled back and Alice collapsed to the floor. I came down from the attic and called the doctors and the police. I handed the bear over to the detective. The records confirmed what Alice said. The crime was qualified as involuntary manslaughter. Both Alice and her son got a reduced sentence and were required to undergo rehabilitation in a center for victims of domestic violence. Well, it's a terrible true story. It's not easy to stand up to a tyrant, but perhaps Alice should have done better to find a way to escape from her husband, and then she and Billy could have avoided this horrific tragedy.
Crime Crackers.